Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a
Hi,
special interview for The Wire. For over a week, a critical question has been at the top of many people's minds. Why is the Narendra Modi government and the Bharatiya Janata Party obsessed with Rahul Gandhi? In a recent article for the Indian Express, one of India's foremost political analysts and commentators has provided four substantial answers. They are not just thoughtful, they are in fact thought provoking. Joining me now to discuss and explain his answers is the Chief Editor of Studies in Indian Politics and the Co-Director of Lokniti's Program for Comparative Democracy, Professor Suhas Palshikar. Professor Palshikar, as I said in that introduction, in a recent article for the Indian Express, you wrote, and I'm quoting you, the question that should make us curious is why the BJP finds it necessary to singularly focus on Rahul Gandhi. Or, as you pithily put it, why the BJP loves to hate Rahul so much. In that article, you suggest several reasons, and I want to go through each of them one by one. The first two answers are what I call tactical. You say criticizing Rahul shows non BJP voters the futility of voting either for Rahul or for his Congress party. But is that actually working at the moment? Has the claim that Rahul has attacked OBCs or that he was wrong in criticizing India abroad undermined his standing in the country?
Right now, what has happened is that at least among the middle classes, what I call broadly the middle classes, that certainly has been happening. They are seeing Rahul Gandhi as an irresponsible leader, someone who some have actually used this word is a liar. Now, when there is an criticism at this extreme level, I think it is going to make some impact on the larger voters as well. As to the OBC constituency, there hasn't been much impact directly visible yet. But you must have noticed that the BJP leaders have been very quick to point out that this has nothing to do with Modi, but about the OBCs, and there is a contempt that the Congress holds for the OBCs.
So you're also suggesting that the impact on the middle classes who are concerned with nationalism in particular is immediate and has happened, but the longer impact about the OBC charge on OBCs themselves, which could be 50% of the country's population, that could happen with time, but it hasn't happened as yet.
Yeah, it is being tapped into, it is being explored currently.
Now, the second reason is again, as I said, a tactical reason. You say criticizing Rahul forces the Congress party to strongly support him, and in turn, that undermines opposition unity because not all opposition parties want to see Rahul as their collected leader. But again, here, is the BJP failing? Because despite the initial wobble with the Shiv Sena, on the disqualification issue, 19 opposition parties are working with Congress, and that includes the Trinamool Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party, two parties which normally keep a distance from Congress.
Yes, I think on this particular point, the other non Congress opposition parties have shown some cleverness, some smartness, and they have quickly responded to it. It is up to the Congress now to reciprocate by not emphasizing the Rahul part of it much and emphasizing the overall embarrassment and harassment of the opposition.
So there's an important catch here. If Congress continues to emphasize the Rahul element, the unity that they've got from opposition parties can start to fracture or diminish. But if Congress actually talks about unity and not Rahul, then this unity can be cemented.
Absolutely. And if the Congress actually sort of expands this issue into the question of democracy generally on the one hand, and also doesn't forget that their current battle at least is over the Adani issue and the unpreparedness of the government to respond to that issue. And if they bring back that focus, I think they would have done a great job for themselves.
So, depending upon how tactically Congress plays it, they can actually use this as a platform to advance opposition unity and cement the 19 parties more cohesively together against the BJP. It all depends upon how Congress plays it.
Sure, yes.
Let's then at this point come to your other two explanations for what you call the BJP's obsession with Rahul Gandhi. These are more substantive explanations. And here I'll go into them in greater depth. You say, and I'm quoting you, Rahul represents a sane view of Indian society and its ills. He appeals to the collective conscience of citizens. And you add, this is dispelling what you call the darkness ushered in by the regime. Now, I think most people would intuitively understand what you mean, but could you explain it a bit more explicitly and fully?
At least on two grounds, this darkness refers to the last 10 years. One is the extreme personalization of authority, and the other is the use of the idea of religious majority or community based majority as the basis of the Indian nation. On both these counts, I think Rahul realizes that these are not the pathways through which India can go successfully, either as a democracy or as a democratic nation state. And therefore, not only during the Bharat Jodo Yatra, but otherwise also, he has been speaking about these issues. I think, in spite of his successes or failures, he has been one of the consistent critiques of the BJP on these grounds rather than many other grounds. And that's why I thought that the effort that he is doing is to arouse this collective consciousness. The collective conscience of India is actually not what the BJP has upheld over the last 10 or even 30 years. Somehow they have managed, however, to suppress that collective conscience, and the job of any politician now countering the BJP is to bring back sanity to our public life.
The interesting thing is you are using a very clever analogy. You're identifying the BJP and its vision with darkness. You're identifying Rahul's message with light. And in that context, you write, and I'm quoting you, darkness does not like nor tolerate even the possibility of any light. This is why the Yatra angered the ruling party. It showed the possibility of a collective conscience willing to be awakened. And what I think you're saying there is that Rahul was awakening a sleeping India to the dangers of the Modi vision, and that would then challenge the Modi vision. And this is why it became so important for the BJP to silence and disenfranchise Rahul, because otherwise the light he was bringing would have dispelled the darkness they were covering India with.
Yes, that is generally what I have meant to say. When you write for a newspaper column, obviously there are some limits of wording and such other things. So let me explain also that I am not saying that the Indian public is sleeping. I would say put to sleep. There is a certain kind of hypnotism that is at work, mass hypnotism that worked over the last decade. And most of us, and I don't exclude anyone really, including myself, have been at one moment or the other been subjected to this hypnotism. That this leader would do something, that this leader is the final word of wisdom is that hypnotism. What Rahul is doing is trying to puncture this spell of hypnotism. And that can be an easy job, but that has always been a very difficult job. You can awaken a sleeping person, but to really bring out of hypnotism a large mass of society is a gigantic task.
But again, you're saying two very important things. Mr. Modi has hypnotized this country, both with the fluency of his oratory as well as with the message of Hindu nationalism. And Rahul, as hypnotists themselves do when they want to wake you up, is snapping his fingers to say, wake up, wake up. And the second thing you're doing is actually you're giving Rahul a lot of credit for having diagnosed the problem correctly. The cure may be difficult and long, and it may take a lot of effort, and maybe Rahul isn't capable of the cure on his own. But nonetheless, you're crediting him for the correct diagnosis and for attempting the correct remedy. You're doing both.
I think, yes, we should be at least that much generous to what Rahul Gandhi has been doing. Despite many failures of his in his political career, I think this understanding, and of course, the credit along with Rahul would go to his close associates who have been advising him. I wouldn't say that he has actually really acquired the saintly wisdom on his own. But in politics today, nobody does that, and nobody should be claiming that there is a collective wisdom. I think this collective wisdom has been contributed by the ruling regime itself to a great extent, by many of their commissions and omissions. They have actually made us aware of these problems.
Let's then at this point come to the second substantive reason why you believe the BJP is obsessed with Rahul. And this time it's a particularly thought provoking one. I'll say that in advance because I'd like the audience to listen very carefully. This second reason is not about Rahul Gandhi, it's about what you call the foundation of India's nation state, which you say is made up of diversity and democracy. And importantly, you add, the core of this diversity is not something borrowed from the West. It's built on India's own history and India's own practices. Can you start, Professor Palshikar, by explaining to the audience this very unique way of viewing the Indian nation state?
It is unique in terms of what the founding fathers and the nationalist movement did. It is not unique in the sense that for us today, it would be sheer blindness or stupidity to forget what our national movement has done. You know, there has been always a thinking that we adopted our constitution on a Western model, and also the idea of nation state that we have adopted comes from the outside. There is this false juxtaposition that what the BJP and their associates are representing is Indian, and what the so-called liberals elites have been doing is a Western construct. I contest that. I would argue that during the national movement, much early and right at the beginning of the 20th century, this problem was understood very clearly by many leaders gradually. The colonial idea of India was that it is not even a society, leave aside a nation. It is simply a conglomerate of different groups having different communal interests. And that's where the word communal really comes into the Indian lexicon. As opposed to that, and most expressively Gandhi, but other leaders subsequently of the national movement point out that there is a civilizational element in our society that binds us together. And that element is that we are different in regions, we are different in traditions, we are different in languages and even religions. It's not just about Hindu Muslim, but even within Hindu, so-called Hindu fold, there are different sects. And in spite of that, and over and above all this, we have a capacity to bind with each other. It is this binding factor that is called the question of diversity and how you deal with diversity. It was not merely tolerance of diversity, a celebration and living with diversity. that is then brought into a modern language in our constitution.
And the real point you're making is that diversity is the essence of India's nation state. And this diversity and this belief it's the essence is not a foreign concept. It's embedded and inherent in India's reality. It's embedded in our history. It's what's made us a nation, this celebration of diversity. It's not a foreign thing, it's Indian to its core.
Yes, many people think that this idea of diversity was probably borrowed from somewhere, but I would say that it is our own homegrown idea, and the transition from existing diversity into a conceptualization of that diversity as the basis of our nationhood is the greatest contribution of the people whom I have mentioned by name in my article. We always juxtapose them with each other. Gandhi was different from Nehru, Ambedkar was opposed to Gandhi, and Patel and Nehru had differences, but all of them actually contribute to this conceptualization from diversity as an existing empirical phenomenon to diversity as a ideological basis of our nationhood.
Which is why you conclude that the very heart and core of India's nation state is a celebration of diversity. And in contrast to this Indian version of the nation state, which is embedded in our constitution, you say Modi is trying to transform India into an un-Indian nation by purging the Indian characteristic of diversity and adopting in its place concepts or principles based upon ethnic and communal uniformity. He's trying to enforce ethnic and communal uniformity in place of India's rich historic diversity. And basically, what you're talking about is Modi's stress on majoritarianism and Hindu nationalism. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. We in India, currently at least, need to call this bluff about the so called celebration of tradition and traditional India by the Hindutva forces. Uh, they actually have borrowed their idea of nation from somewhere else. And that idea is based on this ethnic or religious unity. In fact, I should use the word homogeneity. They want homogeneity. This obsession with one language, this obsession with every oneness in everything is something very unlike our Indian tradition.
And
And
the
this is majoritarianism, yes.
And you make a very interesting, if not ironic point. You say Modi is refashioning the Indian state, the Indian nation state, along lines of foreign concepts of ethnicity and community. And the paradox is the West has rejected and jettisoned those concepts, but Modi is bringing them back and applying them to India.
Exactly. That's what my trouble is that the entire discourse or the entire narrative has been subverted and made to stand on its head. We need to see it clearly as a war or a battle between an un-Indian outside idea, and which is also globally more or less rejected idea, being imposed on us as our idea as Indianness. That is not Indianness. So the next 10, 20 years is going to be a battle for actually fighting for authentic Indianness that we experienced and imagined in the 20th century.
Absolutely. Let me put it like this, Professor Palshikar. The next 10, 15 years will be a battle for the Indian soul. The diversity that Rahul talks about is actually the original historical Indian reality and tradition. The ethnic and communal uniformity that Mr. Modi is trying to impose is not Indian, it's foreign. And oddly enough, even the West has rejected it, but Mr. Modi is nonetheless bringing it to India. And so, what is lying at the core, at the center of this battle for the Indian soul is an Indianness, which is originally Indian, which Rahul talks about diversity, and a foreign attempt to create uniformity, which is what Mr. Modi represents. This is why Rahul is an anathema to Mr. Modi, because in terms of the concept of the Indian nation state, they're not only talking about two completely different concepts, but Rahul's is uniquely, originally Indian, and Mr. Modi's is a foreign import. And that's why they clash.
As I have already said this, I don't know how much of this actually originates in Rahul's own thinking. But paradoxically, it so happens that for the BJP, Rahul represents that particular tradition of Indianness, mainly because of his family connection with Nehru. So it is this visceral hatred of Nehru which is at the root of this imposition on Rahul, some kind of an intellectual greatness. I wouldn't say that Rahul has himself discovered all this, but he is now forced to discover it and forced to take it forward.
I take your point. Rahul, in a sense, represents this. To what extent he's aware of it, we don't know. To what extent is this thinking that has been put into his head by his colleagues and advisors, we don't know. Much of it comes from his grandfather or great grandfather's thinking, but whether he acknowledges all that, again, we don't know. But the important point is that the divide or the fight, if I can put it in terms of a battle, is between diversity, which is Indian, and uniformity, which is foreign. Rahul stands for the Indian diversity, Modi for the foreign uniformity.
Sure, that happens. There is, on the one hand, a craving for homogeneity for everything and a kind of celebration or at least awareness and compulsion of diversity. That is how the intellectual map needs to be divided.
Let me come back to your article. I think, if I've understood your article correctly, this is your conclusion. You say Rahul represents a challenge to both the BJP's ideological position and its brazen exercise of state power. My question is, how serious is this challenge? And secondly, is it the most serious challenge the BJP has faced in the last 9 years?
At the moment, think that at least at the ideological level, it is going to be the most serious challenge. But we must not also forget that in terms of actual politics, over the last few years, the BJP has weathered many other challenges successfully through various ways of manipulation and use of states suppression. This time around, my suspicion is that BJP would rely more on suppression, more on an exemplary use of authoritarian politics to make sure that there is no resistance.
In other words, they won't contest Rahul ideologically, they will suppress him politically.
Yes, that is most likely scenario as I can imagine at the moment.
Which is why, in your article for The Express, you also point out that this challenge from Rahul has created a predicament for the BJP. On the one hand, you say targeting Rahul can only lead to expanding the space he occupies. On the other hand, ignoring him means you're allowing that collective conscience to arouse and awaken, and that's something the BJP definitely does not want. So, in a sense, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, and caught in between.
Sure, as an observer, I would say that yes, this is a very interesting moment for the BJP in terms of the dilemma they face over Rahul and what he has been saying and doing. At the tactical level, they have chosen to take on Rahul head on, to muzzle his voice if possible, and to malign him if possible. Whether it will go in Rahul's direction and whether he would actually become a hero by suffering under this suppression, or whether the collective conscience would still remain somewhat subterranean for some time to come, is something that we would need to watch.
And that is what worries the BJP, because they don't have the answers to either of those two questions, do they?
They don't have the answers, but I think they have at least one answer in their hands, and that is the ruthless use of state power and equally ruthless use of vigilante power. That is in their hands, and they would unleash that.
This also means that tough times are ahead for Rahul. He will be personally targeted, personally vilified, and to the extent they can ensure it, put in jail.
Sure. Tough time for Rahul, of course, personally, but tough time for anyone who is standing with Rahul particularly the Congress party itself. For ordinary Congress workers, this is going to be a tough time in the real sense of the term, because they either sit at home and let BJP have its way, or they come out and face harassment. And that harassment will not be a legal harassment in terms of detentions alone. It would be a harassment of their occupations, harassment of their families, harassment of what they have been doing. And therefore, I say that there would be a ruthlessness attached to it.
Before I let you go, Professor Palshikar, let me put one more possible reason why the BJP is obsessed with Rahul. I should admit, this is not from your article. This is what a lot of people are conversationally, colloquially talking about. They say the BJP is targeting Rahul because they want the next election to become a Modi versus Rahul electoral fight. And if that happens, the BJP is convinced Modi will win hands down. So they are building up a straw man because they know they can easily knock him down when that's necessary. In other words, this is a tactic to make him the leader of the opposition, knowing that when it comes to a one-to-one fight, they can demolish him.
Well, I would not deny that, and we come back to the initial question with which we started. I only think that beyond tactic, the BJP would also have a larger game plan of what they want to do once in power. And what I'm trying to do is to make sense of that ambition of what the BJP wants to do when in power. Tactically, yes, of course, as we said at the beginning, the moment it is made as a contest between Rahul versus Modi, the other opposition parties sort of become cautious on the one hand. They distance slightly from this battle. And on the other hand, let us be frank and honest about this. If there is a personality-based contest between Rahul and Modi, at least as of today, Rahul would stand much less of a chance of winning the election, if that is what we are talking about.
I absolutely understand. And I want to end by pointing out to the audience that the most important thought that you have left, both in your article for the Express, which you've expanded upon very considerably in this interview, are two twin thoughts, to be honest, not just one. That there is a collective conscience, the conscience of the Indian people, which Rahul is trying to awaken and which the Modi government wants to ensure does not happen, because if that conscience awakens, the darkness they've spread, I'm using your terminology, will dissipate. Darkness hates sunlight. And the second thing is your definition of the Indian state. At its core is diversity. That diversity is India's original historic condition. What Mr. Modi is bringing in is a foreign import of ethnic and communal homogeneity and uniformity that is alien to us. And in these broader substantive terms, the battle between Rahul and Mr. Modi becomes, as I said, a battle for the soul and identity of India. And I thank you for opening our eyes to this richer understanding. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.